Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a joy to be with you again this morning, as always. We've just celebrated Thanksgiving holiday with our friends and family, and what a joy it was to give thanks together. I want you all to know how really good we feel when we come into this house to worship you. We're thankful, we're grateful, we love you all, and we love being here with you. You know, we should always give thanks for one another. Linda and I were talking about the fact that it was so good to be with family this year. Just everyone got together, and all of the food and everything that came together. And in fact, it was so warm on Thanksgiving. All of the children that came, it seemed like 1,000 of them, were running through the house and then ran outside and played. And even some of the high school kids, when it got dark, they played hide and seek. And I thought that was absolutely terrific. And they had a great time. It was a joy to be together. Today we're going to look at one of the familiar churches in the Bible. You've heard these so often. And sometimes it's very hard and difficult to preach about these things that you've heard so often. But I think we need to be reminded, especially today, of what it means to be in this house. You remember there are 7 famous churches in the book of Revelation: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Now, why were these particular churches selected to discuss when there were others at Troas, Colossae, Magnesia, and others? Many scholars feel that they were selected because they are representative of churches and ages throughout history. Also, the number of churches chosen, 7, seems to be the number of completeness, which underlies the literary pattern of Revelation. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an exegetical and eisegetical approach to the scripture today. You remember in Revelation there's 7 lampstands, 7 signs, 7 stars, 7 trumpets, 7 crowns, 7 plagues, 7 kings. The number of completeness is very important. So the letters to the 7 churches are really more in nature of messages than they are separate letters. Each message to an individual church was apparently also intended for the other 6 churches. Each message generally contains a common literary plan of 7 parts. The addressee is mentioned first. The speaker is mentioned. The knowledge of the speaker is given. Following an assessment of the church's accomplishments, the speaker pronounces his verdict on their condition. To correct or alert each congregation, Jesus issues a penetrating command. Then each letter contains a general exhortation. And then finally, each letter contains a promise of reward to the victor. The promises are sometimes difficult to interpret as they are symbolic, but many definitely eschatological in nature, pointing to the last 2 chapters of Revelation. So, these churches are all set up with a particular pattern. The book of Revelation was written about anywhere, if you are an early proponent of this, from 54 to 60 AD, shortly after Nero's reign, or later at the close of Domitian's reign between 81 and 96. There were probably existed well over 100 churches during that time. Paul himself planted dozens, and the other apostles would have done the same thing. So why did Christ pick these 7 churches to write to? Traditionally, there are 3 different thoughts as to why these churches were chosen. First, the contemporary thought, that Christ had a direct message to the 7 literal churches existing at that time. All right, even though there's a component of that, Christ did have a message in these churches, but if we accept this purpose as the only purpose, then we should just read over it without thinking that it may not apply to our church today. Everything else in the Bible applies to our today, so why wouldn't these? Second is a composite thought, that these messages are meant to be applied by all churches in all ages existing. This to me sounds like the correct purpose. We can see attributes of each one of these 7 churches in our churches today. The third thought is chronological, that the characteristics of these churches serve as a prophetic review of the 7 great periods of Christendom from Pentecost to the rapture. Again, I'm kind of a component of the composite thought. At this time the letter was written, Ephesus was a flourishing city. Now I want to tell you, it was a cosmopolitan city. It was a capital of a province of Asia. It was a political city. It was a free city, self-governed. And they dealt with the latest trends and fashions and everything that would be happening in society. It was very, very cosmopolitan. It was a city of about 225,000 people, which is large, and possessed a huge harbor. The harbor can accommodate the largest ships from all over the world. So it became one of the largest and wealthiest cities. Now this is all important to understand this church. Ephesus grew, and it had a temple there. The temple was Diana, which was one of the first 7 wonders of the ancient world, being the largest Greek temple ever constructed. Now the Greek name for this deity, Diana, the Greek name was Artemis. The Romanized version of that was Diana. Diana was believed to be the mother goddess of the world by the Greeks. She was a goddess of fertility, life, and reproduction. So the worship of Diana was immoral beyond description. The worship consisted of sexual orgies and sexual mutilation. Also, this house of worship was a bank for the kings and for the merchant people. Also, it was a sanctuary for criminals who were transitioning through that area. They could stay there with immunity from many authorities. The church at Ephesus had much to contend with then, as our churches today have much with which to contend. We're in a contentious, very cosmopolitan society. We all think we're so smart, we're so sophisticated, we're not any different than Ephesus. Hear me, this is real for today as well. So, let's look at the message itself, verse by verse, of this church. To the addressee. To the angel of church in Ephesus write, these are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. Now, who is the word of him who holds? This is Christ himself holds this church. And I'm going to stop there and I'll read on again about this in a minute. Christ holds this church in his hands today. He's walking among you. Christ is telling John what to write to the pastor or leader or spiritual leader of this church of Ephesus. The word angel means messenger, and in this sense could refer to the pastor or leader or even the spirit of the church. I think to the leader of this church. The 7 stars could refer to the 7 pastors or bishops, elders, but it's uncertain if the churches were organized in this way at this time. The 7 golden lampstands that are mentioned refer to the 7 churches. This also tells us that Christ still continues to walk among these churches. And again, I want you to listen to this. Do you know that he's walking in this congregation today? This isn't Bob Miller show up there. This isn't Dr. Miller doing something for you. This is Christ in this house today. That's the implication. This is a holy sanctuary, folks. This is where Christ is. It isn't where somebody you disagree with is sitting. It isn't somewhere where somebody you agree with is sitting here. It's that Christ is simply here today, and we're here in his midst. He's walking among us. I think that's kind of amazing, and I think it's also quite humbling.